Welcome back to A Little Bit of Cheese, your daily bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast. I'm your host, Cody Depios. I want to thank you for being here with us once again today on this October 24th, 2024. The Bucks coming off a huge season opener as they took down the Philadelphia Philly Sixers. The Philadelphia 76ers at Philadelphia, 124-109. Dame led the way. He had 30 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. Giannis with a double-double, 25 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 assists. Taurean Prince and Bobby Portis each had 16 points in their respective roles, but overall, really solid game. It started out pretty tight. At one point, it was Bucks 36, Philly 35, but then the Bucks kind of started to run away with it there in the third quarter of that game, and then able to close it out at the end. Both benches were able to get out there on the floor last night, so it was a pretty stark difference between where these two teams were at, especially with Philadelphia missing their superstars in Paul George and Joel Embiid, which you can go and you can look at the comments on YouTube and all the comments, it's NBA basketball season, and you can know that for sure with Joel Embiid missing out on playing time out on the court because he is within his injury management is what it was under the umbrella of as to the reason why he missed that game. And that's something that 76er fans have been dealing with for his entire career, essentially. He's been dealing with injuries. He likes to manage the time that he's out on the court and the time that he's not and trying to nurse his injuries, and he's been dealing with that. And Paul George, another injury-prone guy. That Philly team, I think, of course, it has a lot of potential. You saw Tyrese Maxey, what he was able to do as the best player on that team yesterday. He was very, very solid there as probably the third best player and the third option for this team. Very solid. You have two really good number ones, essentially. And if they aren't healthy, this team is not going to make a run in the East. And that's kind of what you saw last night. But if they are healthy, Philly could be right there in contention. So regardless, you take the opener win. The Bucks looked solid from top to bottom. Giannis was doing his thing. You saw the pick and roll come out a couple of times between him and Dame. And Dame Lillard, apparently he's been working with David Goggins, which if you don't know who that is, a really big mental coach is how I'll describe David Goggins. He's someone who was way overweight and was a Marine and a Navy SEAL and lost all the weight, and now he's the one guy that he just coaches everybody up. And apparently Damian Lillard has been working with him, and he had a really, really solid opener. Dropped 30 points. He was all over the highlight reels for national media, NBA, ESPN, all of it yesterday. So really awesome to see as Giannis and Dame, they're going to be the two guys to lean on, of course. Gary Trent Jr. looks solid, Taurean Prince, as mentioned, and Bobby Portis doing his thing. This is a solid team. It's very deep. You'd like to see how the young guys can develop there on the bench. We saw a little bit of that last night, not all too much, but as the season goes along, when guys get hurt, you're going to need to see how deep this team is. And yesterday, it was pretty starter-dominated throughout the points that the Bucks were successful, which, of course, you love to see. You want to see that. But this team, I think it has the ability to be deep. It's going to take a little bit of development from those 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th best players for Milwaukee. But a really good opener, 126-109 the final score, Bucks at Philly. Really good game for them as the Bucks get set to take on the Chicago Bulls in a home opener tomorrow. So that'll be at Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee. Some other interesting news from yesterday. Robert Saleh, former Jets head coach, former San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator, and former college roommate of Matt LaFleur, was seen at Packers practice yesterday as Matt LaFleur. This is one of his best friends, and of course Robert Saleh was working with Aaron Rodgers over in New York, was fired 2 weeks ago, but Saleh was seen at practice, as Matt LaFleur calls it, a fluid situation. He brought in Saleh because Saleh is one of his best friends, and Saleh is one of the best defensive minds in all of football. And I think the reason, and LaFleur kind of said this as well in his press conferences, the reason for having Saleh is to have someone to look at the offense and to help out the offense, as he's had to analyze a whole bunch of offenses, being one of the best defensive minds in all of football. So Matt LaFleur brought in Robert Saleh just to work with the offense. He's not trying to touch Jeff Hafley's defense. LaFleur said outright that defensive unit has been working great, which they have. They don't want to touch that. He brought Saleh in to help with LaFleur's offense, which I think is great. Jordan Love gets to work with him a little bit, and you get to pick one of the greatest defensive minds as to what he sees with the flaws in your offense. And I think Saleh is the perfect guy to do this, as I don't know how close him and LaFleur have been the past couple of years. Maybe a little bit more so since Saleh has been in New York and working with the Jets. But when Saleh was working with the San Francisco 49ers, LaFleur and him would often meet in the playoffs. And as we all know as Packers fans, the history between Green Bay facing San Francisco in the playoffs has not gone great as of recent, between how LaFleur and his record goes against them when it comes to the playoffs. And Robert Saleh was defensive coordinator there for 4 years, up through 2022, I believe. So he had a couple of playoff victories over LaFleur, and a couple of those were pretty astonishing. That 2019 game, that 2019 NFC Championship game was bad. It was really bad. That was the one where I believe Raheem Mostert went off for 200 yards or whatever it was, but that was a game that Green Bay was dominated, and Robert Saleh's defense was a big piece to that. So Saleh knows the flaws, essentially, of a Matt LaFleur offense, and I think it's awesome that they're bringing him in to work with the offense, and I also think that it's great that they're leaving Jeff Hafley's side of the ball alone. Like, if you're Jeff Hafley and you've coached this unit to be one of the most successful defensive units in all the NFL throughout the first 7 weeks of the season, and if LaFleur is able to bring Saleh in and say, hey, Jeff, Saleh is going to help you now. He's here to help you. Hafley might be like, this guy's here to take my job. But because this is going to be another conversation as things move along, too. I saw it was talked about on ESPN Lacrosse yesterday. But Jeff Hafley has done so well coaching this defensive unit. There might be conversations of him becoming a head coach next year. Like, there is an actual real possibility of that, which, and I don't want to allude to anything here because I think LaFleur is taking this just surface level. Hey, we're going to take somebody who knows most of the flaws with what's wrong with my system, and he's going to come in and he's going to try to help us out. I don't think he's bringing Saleh into the building because maybe they want him as a defensive coordinator next year. Because Jeff Hafley has been so good, I actually doubt that he's going to stay as just a defensive coordinator. I think that's really been the case with what's happening in Green Bay, which is incredible. And it's awesome to see where Green Bay is at right now, where both sides of the ball are working really, really well at this point. You don't want to see Hafley go, but there might be the possibility that it happens in the future, and there might be the possibility that Matt LaFleur wants to reunite with Robert Saleh. And this is very early. This is almost an allegation for me. This is way too quick for me to even say this, but Saleh has been – they brought him into the building. He was working and staying with the LaFleur family this week. He worked with the team. He's working with them through today on Thursday, and then he's going to fly back home tomorrow on Friday. So he's spending time with the Packers. He's spending time with LaFleur, and I understand these two are very good friends. They were together when they were in Washington as well. They were college roommates. They're like best buddies, and you can understand it from that standpoint. But there comes a point when, and of course LaFleur, he's part of making those decisions when it comes to the defensive coordinator. He was part of the reason why Joe Barry was in Green Bay longer than he should have been. And I think Jeff Hafley has been so good, he's going to get head coach looks for next year. And that might be a possibility. And I imagine that Robert Saleh is going to be up for contention as well. Because what he did in New York this year, even with all that was going on with Aaron Rodgers, he took care of his side of the ball. The New York Jets had one heck of a defense through the point where he was fired. I was actually very surprised that he was fired because where the Jets were struggling was not his fault. I didn't think Saleh was the problem. And that's one of the reasons why I don't see the Jets really succeeding this year, even after they had brought in Devontae Adams. But it's kind of just funny to see the Matt LaFleur, Robert Saleh, Aaron Rodgers kind of tree going around here. Of course, Rodgers was in Green Bay. He helped there when LaFleur first came in. LaFleur helped him win a couple of MVPs. They kind of ended up having a fallout, not really a bad one where they see each other personally as bad people, but one where Rodgers knew he didn't want to stay in Green Bay. So Rodgers went over to New York to go play for Robert Saleh, who, of course, is one of LaFleur's best friends. And then I think there has since been a falling out between Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh, regardless of whatever Aaron Rodgers has said to the media since Saleh has been fired. But now Saleh's coming back around, and he's working in with Matt LaFleur and helping out the offense. I think this is good. This is a good thing for the team. And I don't know. I think the biggest concern here, and it was talked about a little bit by Jordan Love in a couple of articles, but the biggest concern for the Packers right now is Jordan Love taking care of the ball. And I talked about it, saying if it was a problem or not. But if there is a problem right now for Green Bay, of course, it is the special teams and the silly, silly mistakes that they've made so far through this point, and the turnovers on offense. They've been turning the ball over on defense enough, which has helped immensely. But to cut down on those interceptions, like there are a couple of boneheaded ones. Like last week, just a few. That throw to Watson was just bad. You don't want to see that. I like that he's taking chances. I like that he's being aggressive. I don't see it as a huge problem. But for the things to fix to make this a real Super Bowl contender, which I think they are at this point, one of the things to fix for this contender is working on the turnovers. And maybe that's a conversation that Saleh is having with Love. Like maybe he's saying, hey, we're going to put an extra corner over the middle here because we know that you're going to try to force it sometimes. Like that might be one of the conversations, or however they try to scheme to get Love to make those aggressive throws into coverages that he shouldn't. Maybe Saleh points that out to him, and maybe that helps him out a little bit. And LaFleur has done a near perfect job scheming for the offense this year, but if anybody can improve, and if there were any way that he could improve, I think it would be hearing advice from Robert Saleh out of the goodness of his heart, being like, hey, buddy, I see this side of your offense. I would try to exploit this. So then LaFleur can go back to the drawing board, try to scheme against that, and just try to tighten up a couple of the loose ends. But having more ideas in the building, I don't think is a bad thing. It was a couple of years ago where this was kind of done before by Matt LaFleur. He brought in Detroit's Aubrey Pleasant to help on offense after Aubrey Pleasant was let go as the Lions defensive backs coach and their passing game coordinator. He brought Pleasant into the building to go and try to help the offense. Of course, that didn't really help in the end as Green Bay wasn't able to make the playoffs. But this isn't an entirely new thing where LaFleur is bringing in guys from the outside to come in and try to help out. And this just so happens to be one of his best friends and his former college roommate in Robert Saleh. So just a little bit of food for thought, but I think really cool tidbit there. Really good Bucs win yesterday. We'll be excited to watch them as they move along. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk Badgers, we'll talk Packers, and we'll talk Bucs. We'll get you ready for all those games. I'm Cody Depius, your host. I want to thank you for being here with us once again today, as this has been another edition of A Little Bit of Cheese, your daily bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast.